I just wanted to jump on here really fast and let everybody know that I Am Salt Lake podcast is going to have a booth at the Downtown Farmers Market this upcoming Saturday, June 16th. So mark that on your calendar. The Downtown Farmers Market is located at Pioneer Park and goes from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. We love to meet our listeners, so please stop by and say hello.
Showcasing local talent, professionals, and everyday people making Salt Lake City what it is today. It's time for another episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast.
All right. I want to welcome everybody out to the show today. Welcome to episode 333 of I Am Salt Lake podcast. My name's Chris.
And my name's Chrissy.
Hey, we're recording out of our awesome studio here at Access Co-working Spaces right in the heart of downtown, right on the corner of 200 West, 200 South. If you get an opportunity, come check this place out. We have an awesome episode, though. Before we get into that, though, I've been dying to talk about the Pride Parade, Chrissy. This happened last Sunday. I know we're kind of a week behind. I apologize to the listeners that are like, hey, we are past the Pride Parade.
It's over.
But I wanted to talk about how awesome it was. It makes me so proud to live in Salt Lake City and how awesome downtown gets on Pride Sunday. I wish every Sunday was that way.
Oh, for real. And you looked fabulous, by the way. We actually got a march in the parade with Five Wives Vodka this year. And it was Lucy's first year at Pride. So it was really cool to take her and be able to be everywhere with her through the streets.
Well, what I figured was a lot of times we go to watch as spectators. And I said, hey, let's take Lucy to the parade. And let's, Five Wives had like a float, like a section. I don't know what they call the parade. But Five Wives Vodka is a sponsor of this podcast. So I figured, you know what? Let's go support them. They support us.
Yeah.
Why not do it? A wonderful experience. Like I said, Five Wives Vodka is a proud sponsor of I Am Salt Lake podcast, as well as Market Source Real Estate. We're going to tell you more about these great businesses a little bit later in the show.
This episode of the podcast is a little bit different because I was in Wisconsin at the time of recording. So, Chris, you had to carry on the torch without me. On
this episode of the podcast, I got to sit down with Isaac Riddle from Building Salt Lake. And like you said, Chrissy, you weren't here. I didn't even know. I'm like, should I continue with this recording? I mean,
I was kind of bummed.
He was scheduled to come in.
Yeah.
And what was really cool, though, about it, Chrissy, is our friend Mark Benson, who you heard from the Waymark company. He builds the backpacks.
Waymark Gear Co.
Yeah, Waymark Gear Co. He shot me a message. He says, hey, I'll come on down. So he actually joined me as kind of a guest co-host on this episode. And it was a great conversation. It was actually more of a Q&A session, which I know you haven't even listened to this yet,
I know.
Chrissy.
I'm really excited to listen to it.
So there were a lot of questions from listeners that were submitted to our Facebook group. And we got a lot of questions answered about what's going on here in Salt Lake City, a lot of the building, a lot of unanswered questions from people, right? He does buildingsaltlake.com, fantastic blog, which you're going to want to check out. But let's cut the chit chat of all of that. Let's jump right into that conversation that we had with Isaac Riddle when he came over to our office here at Access in beautiful downtown Salt Lake City. Enjoy. What did your childhood smell like, Isaac?
Gardens and compost.
Gardens and compost.
Yeah.
Big gardening family, I guess, based on.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, my dad was very much ahead of his time for a Mormon baby boomer. We were eating kale in the 80s and composting, and most of our backyard was a garden.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you grow up here in Utah?
Bountiful.
Really?
Yeah, right. Actually, near Highway 9, kind of just right in the heart of like that area too. So it was no farm by any means, but we used what land was available.
Do you still garden a lot today?
Not
as much as you should, probably.
Not
right?
as much as I should. I mean, we have a plot about the size of this table, so it's probably like 5 feet by 5 feet, maybe.
Okay.
That you still get out and
produce
garden. A lot of things out of it, but we make the best of it.
Now you took off. I was doing a little bit of research on you before we sat down and recorded. You went out to Philadelphia for school, right?
I went out to teach school.
So you went out to teach. Where did you go to school then?
Well, I did my master's in Philadelphia.
Okay, so at Temple there.
So after undergrad, I left pretty fast. I left Salt Lake fast enough for I got my diploma in the mail in Philadelphia.
Now, why were you sick of Salt Lake City at the time?
I grew up LDS.
Okay.
And I needed to get the hell out of Dodge.
Okay.
I was anxious. Like I had my name removed from the records maybe a month before.
We get a lot of those on the
so for
pod,
me,
you
it
know?
was just, I just needed.
You needed a change.
I was anxious to go somewhere else for a little bit.
How many years ago was that compared to where we're at now?
This was 11.
Okay, so quite a while.
Yeah.
I mean, there was still a lot of change that needed to happen here in Salt Lake City.
Oh no, the Salt Lake I came back to is not the Salt Lake I left.
Well, that's what I mean. 11 years ago, it was a completely different city versus what it is now. Philadelphia is great, man. I actually lived out. Do you know where Wilkes-Barre is?
Yeah.
Like I lived out there for about 5 years.
Okay.
This was probably about 20 years ago. So again, it was Salt Lake City was a different city at that time. We'd go down to Philadelphia. A lot of them actually heading out to Philadelphia in July. Big podcast conference going on out in Philadelphia.
Also, a city that is the city I left. It's not the city I arrived to. Philadelphia as well.
Dude, it's been years, man. What did you leave?
I got there right as.
Is it dirtier
kind of
now?
An urban, no, it just kind of like a little urban is, with all things, the trends hit the biggest cities first.
Sure.
I got there right when the urban renaissance was kind of starting, and
okay.
Most of the country.
Do you miss Philadelphia at all? A little.
Not
bit.
as much as I missed the mountains when I was in Philadelphia. So,
what is it about the mountains that people miss, man? Like I was actually thinking about that.
You grow up, and just they're there all the time. Growing up in Bountiful, they were, we could bike to them.
Yeah.
we all had massive quads because we had to bike uphill everywhere. But they were just, it's that friend you get so used to that it's hard to be away from them.
Well, and it makes sense for Mark. He gets out and does a lot of hiking. I don't know if you're much of a hiker.
It's dirt. That's my church now. It's Dirt Church.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Dirt Church, which unfortunately maybe even more popular than Saturdays now because like Sundays are even busier
think
now.
Unless you grow up around the mountains, that you wouldn't miss it. But there's.
But I definitely have friends that have become very attached
to the mountains.
Yeah.
No, I mean they're beautiful. Don't get me wrong, but there's sometimes like I hear people that are just like, I love the mountains, and it's like, okay, I mean I get it, they're beautiful, but I mean to really pick that based on where you live, I just find it fascinating.
It's truthfully like when I came back, I came back in 2014, so it was just right. Maybe it was a year before Salt Lake started getting really hot and transplants started to.
Where it's the cool place to live,
exactly,
man.
Where we started getting kind of the more droves of transplants. So when I came back, people were like, why'd you come back? And at first I'd be like, oh, well, family and other things like that. But when I would just say the mountains, that was enough. Everything else usually needed to follow up. But I just say I missed the mountains. That satisfied everybody. That was an acceptable response. They got that.
So what'd you go? You went to school for what now? What did you go to school for? Writing, journalism?
So undergrad, I did in English literature.
Okay.
And I got my master's in journalism at Temple University. But I did that. I taught high school in North Philadelphia. If you know Philly, Kensington.
More or less. It's been 5 years. It's been a while since I've been out there.
It's not really a neighborhood I can compare Kensington to Salt Lake. Because,
dude, it's Philadelphia.
To me,
completely.
There's rough neighborhoods that don't exist in the state of Utah.
No.
If you tell me if you tell me Rose Park's rough, I already know you've never traveled. I was like, those big old trees are just, so beautiful. What a rough neighborhood.
Well, and it's funny too. Like my mom lives down in Utah County, right? So she hates to come up to Salt Lake City to visit me. Oh, it's such a big city, but it's like the traffic is worse down in Utah County, in my opinion. I mean, the traffic is a lot worse down there.
I know I'm not the only one that feels this way. I have some friends that feel strongly too, but you can tell the further away. You can tell you're getting further away from Salt Lake by how the drivers are. Like I've found that when I voice my own theory, people seem to agree.
Yeah.
They're just, I don't know. The driving gets a little more interesting.
Salt Lake's its own special city, man.
In Utah, I think a lot of local people, there's still a fear of diversity. And so diverse neighborhoods are dangerous in their mind. Even though I think me and a lot of Salt Lake residents, that's why we live in Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
I'm way more scared. And I would be way more afraid to move to downtown Orem than I would living in any
just because
place in the city.
You would get judged a lot more.
Well, to me, homogeneity scares me a lot more than than diversity.
Yeah.
I'm a city boy through and through.
Let's fast forward a little bit to Building Salt Lake. So I know what buildingsaltlake.com is more or less, but for listeners, a lot of people that are listening might not have ever even heard of it, been to the website. Have you been to buildingsaltlake.com, Mark?
I haven't, no.
Yeah, so
but now I will.
Well, hopefully that changes after.
What is it?
If you want to know what's happening, if you see something that's happening in the city that's, from kind of an urban and community development perspective, I'm covering it. I started in 2014, right before things really started taking off, and I just cover really just the urban development urban development and redevelopment our city's kind of just growing through right now, and looking at kind of the center is just advocating for smart growth.
And what prompted you to make this website? What is the inspiration behind it?
Truthfully, it was I wanted to come back to Salt Lake, and this is the kind of writing I wanted to do, and nobody was doing it, so I just figured I would create the medium that I wanted to. I would just create my own. I would create the news site that I wanted to write for.
So it isn't necessarily the city. The city has nothing to necessarily do with the website directly.
No. Sometimes I have to be critical of.
Sure. See, and I wasn't sure of that before I even sat down with you. I was like, well, it's a very well done website. The news. Where are you getting all your news and information from?
A lot of different channels. I mean, they're all the really standard journalism channels.
Okay.
With what I do, I just get to be a little more. This kind of niche media. I get to be a little more specific.
Okay.
Than the Trib does, or Desert News does, if they're covering the same story. I get to go into a little more detail, just because my readers, if you're a regular reader of Building Salt Lake, you have a little deeper understanding, a deeper interest in urban development and some of this kind of concepts that typical reader of the Trib or Desert News doesn't necessarily have, because they have to create news that's interesting to the whole state.
So why did you decide to go a blog route versus a podcast route?
I briefly did podcasts
of Building Salt Lake.
It was called Salt Lake on the Streets.
Okay.
It was a partnership with KRCL. I think I was one of 2 or 3 partnerships at the time.
Yeah, they've done a few up there.
They did, and they moved away from that now that Radioactive is every day.
Okay.
But so this was pre that.
So you were doing a podcast kind of similar theme of buildingsaltlake.com?
It was just more in-depth conversations. Okay. So I'd bring in like the head of transportation, and I would bring in I was doing it when we had the mayoral race in 2015, so I brought in both candidates, and it was just more in-depth conversations for my fellow city nerds.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of complimentary. But truthfully, too, a lot of the stuff I do it's too breaking for kind of the podcast format, or a podcast format could be an addition to it. Kind of what we're doing was complementary to what we're doing, because podcasting does allow for like more in-depth conversations. For some of the breaking stuff, I mean, you could do short format, audio, but I love all, I'm a modern journalist. I've been trained in all mediums, so I'm always a fan of digital media and incorporating that some way in the future too. So,
what are your thoughts on print? Do you think print's dying?
I graduated in 2013 with my master's in journalism, so it was something that was already an ongoing issue when I was, actively studying, looking at the medium. And to me, print won't die. Just like I don't think retail is going to die. Books didn't die. They'll change. I passionately believe that, and for my own research too, that what's happening to print is a combination of things. It's not just people losing interest in having a physical newspaper. That's a part of it. But the Federal Communications Act, was it 1996, that just really drastically changed media ownership. You can pinpoint a lot of newspaper struggles starting to happen with that. It's people started buying newspapers with no knowledge of how to run a newspaper, and trying to apply business principles that have never meshed.
Yeah.
With print. So in some ways too, like that's the experience where that's kind of been the new experiment is, can these newspapers fit a different business model? And the answer is no, it doesn't look like they can. So I think now it's going to be finding what is that model? And, the millennials are, showing that they have a growing appreciation for information than previous generations. So I think as they especially get a little older and are a little cash strapped, we'll see more of a return to understanding the need to pay for good journalism.
Yeah.
That good journalism isn't free. And I'm in the position where I'm a journalist and kind of an entrepreneur, and I have to remind people that you wouldn't do your job for free.
Oh, of course.
Don't expect me to do the same thing.
Now, are you submitting anything on any other publications or websites or blogs at all? Or is it all just everything, all your energy going into buildingsaltlake.com?
I'll do some freelancing. It's been more passive, so it's people who like what I do at Building Salt Lake. So they reached out to me. So I regularly contribute to Downtown Magazine and Utah Construction and Design, and I did a feature for City Weekly years ago. But
what was that about?
It was wasted space downtown.
We have a lot of that here.
We do.
Yes.
We're having, luckily some of it's going away. And now we're down to, it's a lot of wasted space with only a few owners. So that's kind of our current situation. What's kind of available to purchase is being purchased. And over the next few years, it's really going to kind of depend on what the church wants to do with some of their large blocks.
I have a lot of questions here. I want to jump right into. I don't know. Did you see them? They were posted in the I Am Salt Lake group.
I did see some. Yeah.
Which I invite everybody to join, just because I typically like to throw up who we're bringing on the podcast. Invite people, for questions. If they have questions, you can join that. Go to iamsaltlake.com/group, and that will forward you right to the Facebook group. Hopefully you can answer these, Isaac. I don't know.
I saw some.
Well, first of all, this is a big topic right now. Brad Wheeler, which I'm sure you know who Brad is, he wants to know, why is the rent so damn high? And I mean,
and this comes up a lot. And sometimes I have to remind people to not shoot the messenger. When I cover development, and I'll mention that a project's market rate or affordable. Rent is high right now because even Salt Lake City, we're still relatively conservative in a lot of ways, and our developers are, and we were a little slow to realize how popular of a destination we were becoming. And we were slow to get building. And by the time the real building boom started, we already had like a 2% vacancy rate. Healthy is 5%.
Really?
We're still not even at 5%. And look how much is coming up around us. We're averaging,
but
between 1,000 to 2,000 new units,
paying enough to cover some of the rent.
Well, they aren't because a lot of the rent right now is more of relation to supply and not incomes. So we're already seeing it. Denver, for example, San Francisco, rents have stabilized and are slightly dropping now because supply has caught up to demand. So we're still in the thick of supply, and a lot of reports, once again, don't shoot the messenger. I don't like being the bearer of bad news, but the demand is so high still that it's going to take another few years before we even reach that healthy 5% rental vacancy rate. And about 6% is where 5% you'll start to see rents will kind of stop climbing, but it's not till about 6% where they'll start to dip a little bit until they get to as it kind of the market corrects itself a little bit. But, we need to still build more.
Yeah. Which it goes back to wasted space, though. There's a lot of wasted space in this area. I mean, especially, you go out west. I mean, it's ridiculous. And you don't even have to go that far out of downtown, in my opinion, to go west. And there's a lot of wasted space there. And
some of that has been, developers have been afraid to do anything until the road home's gone on the west side.
Sense.
That's true.
So now that there's kind of a deadline, for when it's got to go, the chatter's getting a little louder now. I think you had a lot of developers who were just kind of waiting.
Now,
you'll see a lot on the west side.
You think the gateway, the whole rejuvenation there has really kind of helped with that kind of that deadline that you're talking about as well?
I think it's helped renew confidence. I think that's the big thing.
People gave up over there, man.
They do. And truthfully too, this isn't just Salt Lake too, but nationally too, the Great Recession was a real estate issue in the beginning. And so because of that, there's still a lot of residual trauma in a lot of the developers development community, even the banks that lend. Everyone's just very cautious. Everyone wants to, triple check their boxes before they kind of move in on a project. And you're definitely still seeing some of that. So they want to see as little risk as possible. Because even now you'll talk to a lot of developers and so much of what they think is happening in Salt Lake must be too good to be true, and they're just waiting for the sky to fall. Just because, it's a decade ago when the sky did fall. And so that's still kind of fresh on their minds, and we got to get past that a little bit because that's part of what is creating
the problems.
Such damn high rents. We're not building fast enough, and a part of that citywide too. I mean, I have to acknowledge that there are some developers that are ready to go, and stuff's taking longer. Just the city also wasn't ready to handle the uptick in permits too. So some of that too is just time. It takes a while. It's taking a little longer than it used to get a building permit through.
Another question here, Stuart Graves. He says, any news on the Regent Street Hotel? After seeing the great design, I was really hoping this one would happen.
That comes up a lot. You hear different things. The developers will tell you it's still on, but that's the most news value is they've said, at least a few months ago, they've said it's not dead. There were some financing issues.
Okay.
So they had secured some financing and then had to find some new sources just because that original source had ran into some other non-related issues. So it's that project. I think it's the best answer is maybe. It's kind of up in the air still. It really comes down to, can they secure the new financing they need? And if not, it's an RDA parcel. So if it doesn't come true, something else will happen there because the city has a little more control has a little more oversight over that site than other areas. So
Nicole Davison wants to know, is there a priority to set aside affordable units to help combat homelessness?
Yes. And,
man, you know all the information. Dude, this guy.
Well, I mean, truthfully, too, I mean, even at City Hall, because everyone, even the people who are running the city, you only know what you're working on.
Sure.
So even they'll tell me that that's how they know what their colleagues are working on, what's happening. So no, I mean, I've made it my business to know what's happening in the city. So to keep you informed. But yeah, with affordable housing, there's a priority, and Salt Lake is definitely, from what I've seen, for most cities, San Francisco is a great example. Cities that were trying to address this issue too late. Like Salt Lake's one of the few cities that, because I used to even cover cities nationally too, and I've looked at what a lot of cities do, and we are unique in the sense that we are trying to address this issue as we're in the midst of a growing boom. This is still the early stages of Salt Lake's building boom. We're Austin in like 2006. This is
really. Oh, you think it's just going to blow up here?
Oh yeah. I mean,
we haven't even seen it.
I don't think most people, from my experience, because I have the luxury too, doing what I do, that I'm always coming up first on Google. If you just about any something related you search, I come up, and I'm more than one article will come at the top 10.
I accept that challenge.
Thank you. So I hear, for a lot of out-of-state firms and stuff, they find me pretty quickly.
Really?
They're researching the city. Out-of-state interest is huge. We were the smallest market to ever crack the top 10 last year in ULI's top real estate markets to watch. The smallest market to ever crack the top 10. So what Denver, Seattle, and Austin were last decade is now it's Salt Lake, Nashville, and Raleigh is my opinion.
Huh.
Wow.
Those are the three. And if you quick Google search, you can kind of see that those are the cities right now where it's not just because everywhere cities are kind of coming back. In Salt Lake, it's more of kind of being discovered. And at the end of the day too, businesses love blue cities and red states.
Yeah.
So, red state taxes and blue city lifestyle for their workers. And we've got that. So
we need to actually take a quick break here really fast to play a message from our sponsors, but then there's a boatload of more questions that I know you're going to be able to answer, Isaac. So hang tight. We'll be right back. Hey, it's that time of the podcast where we take a few minutes of your time and tell you about our awesome sponsors. These are some great businesses, guys, they're supporting this podcast. So pay attention to what we have to say and support these guys. I mean, I'm serious. Hey, this episode of the podcast is sponsored by Market Source Real Estate.
If you're like me and you love the charm and character of old homes, you need to contact our friends Monique and Jeremy Higginson of Market Source Real Estate.
So for the past 17 years, they've actually been specializing in helping people buy and sell homes in the Sugar House and Greater Salt Lake area.
And they have a background of flipping houses, and they've owned almost 24 homes themselves, so they know the ins and outs of older homes.
If you're looking to sell your home, Market Source Real Estate, they specialize in helping sellers update or repair their home, which will increase their value and make sellers more money.
And if you're looking to buy an old home, they know what to look for in older homes so you don't end up buying a money pit. You can find their info at thinksaltlakecity.com today or call 801-810-6773.
Again, the website is thinksaltlakecity.com. Their phone number, give them a call, 801-810-6773. And many thanks to Market Source Real Estate for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Hey, this episode of the podcast is also sponsored by Five Wives Vodka. You know, if you're a longtime listener of the podcast, you know we talk about these guys like in every episode. They're awesome. Like we mentioned at the beginning, we actually got to go march with them and like do the parade with them, which was a lot of fun.
It really was. And when I told people at work that I got to do that, one of my coworkers was like, "Oh my gosh, I love Five Wives Vodka." And he went on a rampage about how great the vanilla flavor is.
We need to bring him on.
We do.
And talk about how much. Hey, because you know what? Okay, this is the thing, guys. If you're in Texas, drink Tito's, do all that. But when you're here in Utah, when you're here in Salt Lake City, drink Five Wives Vodka. The next time you're at your local bar or state liquor store, make sure to ask for Five Wives Vodka by name. They actually have 3 different flavors of Five Wives Vodka that we want to tell you about. They have the original Five Wives Vodka. This is made from the Utah mountain spring water. It's 100% distilled corn spirit, and it's gluten-free. Spring is hidden up in beautiful Ogden Canyon. It's inaccessible by vehicle, so they actually have to hike out the water 5 gallons at a time, which I believe we talked about in the last episode with Timothy.
We did, yeah.
When he was on
He's the one that actually hikes it out. And Five Wives Sinful is a flavored vodka with a delicious cinnamon taste. Unlike other cinnamon products that leave that cinnamon candy taste in your mouth, Sinful is like a morning cinnamon roll, and it only has 76 calories per ounce.
Then they have the Heavenly, which is a favorite of mine. This is another flavored vodka with a delicious vanilla taste. Heavenly's rich, buttery vanilla flavor comes through without coating your taste buds with sugar, which results in more vanilla and less calories. Their website, fivewivesvodka.com, is where you can head on over to check out more about them, find out more about them, check out some recipes, connect with them on Facebook and Twitter and all of that good stuff. And many thanks to Five Wives Vodka for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. So before we left for break, I actually realized we didn't even answer Nicole's question on is there a priority to set aside affordable units to help combat homelessness? So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Isaac?
And yes, there definitely is. And yeah, the city council in 2016 felt they felt frustrated. The mayor wasn't just being aggressive on housing, on ensuring affordable housing. So in a kind of an unprecedented event, because affordable housing is usually not part of the redevelopment agency's purview, they, as the redevelopment agency, set aside $21 million. And then what that went to, because the mayor's the head of the RDA, the redevelopment agency, then created the Blue Ribbon Commission to then look at kind of how that money could be allocated. And through kind of the normal bureaucratic process, at the end of last year, they kind of really decided where and how those funds should be directed. So, based on city council priorities, it's not only is there a push, but there's a push to make sure that it's in mixed income neighborhoods. You know, history shows that clustering income restricted people into, homogeneous neighborhoods doesn't help anybody, including those residents. That no matter your income status, everyone benefits living in an area of high opportunity.
Sure.
So that's and now with this new kind of the council's created that as really a new mandate now. So any developers that are going to want funding are going to have to be building near transit and building in more mixed income and mixed income in neighborhoods and more mixed income projects too. So I think we'll see a lot more of what Becker actually kind of started was really kind of incentivizing developers to reserve a portion of the project for income restricted housing. That's still happening. You see it like Liberty Boulevard, that project where most people know is the new apartments that has the Chipotle on 400 South. 20% of those units will be income restricted, but there's a supply issue regardless of your income bracket. And so those are going pretty fast.
I got
So we'll still have to build a lot more of that too, but it's happening and it's coming. And a part of it is just the more we can get the supply to catch up to demand, the more we'll see rents start to go to a more
affordable level,
manageable level.
And affordable is tough. It's not like it's really that crazy, but it's hard on a single person's income to afford a lot of the rent that's going on.
Especially if your wages aren't rising.
Yeah.
And in the same way too, I think we'll see wage increases just because our unemployment rate's so low and people have to start being competitive. I think last year was the first time that there wasn't a school district in Salt Lake where a teacher was earning less than 40. That was because of competition. Districts, and they're doing it again too. Jordan district, which has notoriously been like
it's still
the
sad
worst
though,
offender.
man, that a teacher is only making 40
is
a
upping
year,
even
though.
more. Oh, I'm not. But
No,
it shows.
I know.
But it shows how when you got to compete to get people to work for you, you got to offer more. And
Sure.
when you see it in education, you know it's going to be happening elsewhere too. It's usually happens last in education.
So Isaac Atencio, he is actually my barber. He has a boatload of questions here.
Amazing
man.
first name.
Great name, right? Yeah, Isaac. No relation to you, though, I'm sure. Same name, just coincidences, right? Anyway, hey, so he has a question here, and I don't know. He says, what does he know about the Life on State project? I've never even heard of this. Have you heard of this?
Oh,
Mark?
yeah.
What is the Life on State project?
Yeah, it's happening, and if you're involved in the Life on State project with any of these things, you have to, when everything gets finalized and approved, you have to hold leaders accountable to make sure they get carried out. Because we have a bicycle and pedestrian master plan too that we've all but stopped seeing new bike lanes. So this project would it's with Salt Lake City and South Salt Lake. It's UDOT. It's Wasatch Front Regional Council. It's just looking at ways to make State Street more human.
Okay.
More for the human experience, you know, the pedestrian experience, for the cyclist, for the transit user. And so right now it's really just bringing in local businesses in the area, bringing in residents to kind of create a collaborative vision for really what State Street could be. So,
speaking of State Street, what is with the shady motels on State Street, man? Like there's this gap like on State Street, like what is that, 1700 South there? Dude, it's kind of sketchy. Like,
State Street's got motels and car dealership problems.
Yeah.
Those are the two biggest culprits. But,
well, the car dealerships don't make me nervous, man. But some of those, some of those motels, I'm just like, ugh, what is going on in there?
Well, I hate wasted space. I see dealerships. I'm like, those should not be anywhere near a city. That's a suburb type thing. But no, with the motels, so one of the more notorious offenders is now housing. So right now it's temporary transitionary housing, and that's the one that's just near 1700 South on State Street. I
think I read an article about that for homeless, right? They're going to have some homeless people living there or temporary.
They're already there.
They're already there,
and they put up a fence to kind of
lock them in.
It also protects people too, because there's people also prey on the neediest people. So. Really, it helps limit transactions. But the plans for that is to. Last time I checked, it's going to be a 4-story mixed income project. It'll just be offered for a range of affordability. And those plans are still in the works. I think it's Utah Housing Corporation or the Salt Lake City Housing Corporation is who's running that right now. And so they're just using transitionary housing until I think next year is the plan to start construction.
Another question here is any info on the revamped plans for Granary District, or that's how you say it, right? Is that how you say it?
The Granary District.
Granary District, yeah.
That's definitely one too where, and I think we're going to see this with Station Center too. That's the road home area.
Okay,
is when we start to see the infrastructure improvements. That's a sign that like some of the bigger projects are on their way. Because both those neighborhoods, there's some upkeep needed. Before they could even support bigger developments. Yeah, with the Granary, people have been interested in the fleet block, and that's the big That's the block that's bounded by 800 South to 900 South and 300 West to 400 West, like right across from like those art space. That's city owned. The Housing and Neighborhood Development owns that. Hand owns that, but the RDA, through a lot of RDA loans, we're already seeing some cool little kind of projects that are getting help on the way. I think the Spice Kitchen Incubator just opened up a new space there. Another brewery is opening up as well. Actually, one kind of interesting development too is, although some may view it outside of the granary, it's just close enough where these developers are kind of identifying it as a granary space, but just north of Target. It's just that weird little space where like you have where the on-ramp is.
Oh yeah.
There's that little lot, 70 townhomes.
Interesting.
But that kind of tells you when developers are building in those kind of spaces, that shows confidence in those neighborhoods. And Central 9th, the private sector feels pretty confident about Central 9th right now. And I think you're going to see spillover into Granary.
Interesting.
And we already are, because like that's 70 townhomes in a lot that a lot of us wouldn't first think to, where if we were going to build somewhere. And the natural gas station that closed down, that's now owned by those by the same developers that are building that. It's that 6-story apartment building right off like Goltz and Jefferson that you see when you're on the 900 South on-ramp. And so you'll see a similar size project there too. And it's just going to, those two neighborhoods are essentially, I think we'll see just kind of merged into one, as the Granary has kind of more of the breweries. And
yeah,
I know the pickle factory too. There's plans for that.
Well, did they have to tear that building down?
No, it's going to be preserved.
That's awesome. That's a great
They
building.
actually won a grant.
Okay.
A preservation grant for that. So
that's great.
So, and that's going to be, Ori Media is going to kind of build kind of a media arts venue there.
See, I can definitely see that's definitely going to be pulling in more people, more businesses like breweries and different things. At some point you can't just have it all downtown. I think like you're saying, it's going to kind of spill out into some of these areas. You kind of have these other little 9th and 9ths and so forth, other districts. And
historically too, like development follows breweries. We've had 2 open up in the past, year and a half, and there's another one on the way right next to Big O Tires on 300 South, on 300 West. And so that's a factor too. Like that renews interest as well. You have some periphery stuff too, that it's not the Granary, but that food alley across from where the Sears is. And I know that, in that Sears block too, now that Sears is gone too, that's a huge block opened up for development.
Well, and that's what Isaac actually was wondering, what's going on with, do you know what's going on with Sears?
I haven't heard any specific plans, but I've know there's interest.
See, and I've heard there's that's going to turn into a big food court or something.
No, food alley's across the street from it.
From Sears.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's happening.
Across what street?
Across State Street.
To where there's a video shop there now or something?
So so it's going to actually kind of create like an L.
Okay.
So it'll have frontage on State Street and 800 South.
So where that auto dealer is, the first class cars.
No. On the other side, on north of that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, I'm following.
So it's where it'll kind of it'll be between what, like Mountain America, and then it'll be between the 2 properties that anchor those corners. And
there was the old bike shop that closed and everything. Yeah. And
some of those buildings will go down. Some will still be retained. And then, especially on the more 800 South side, they're going to put in kind of a mini container park. So, and they're still moving forward with that. I know that the family that's doing that just presented to the Central City Community Council last month. So their plans are still alive and well for that.
Isaac's got a few more questions here, man. He's a question.
It comes with the name, man. We're just we
Anyway, he wants to know what are some neighborhoods that he feels will be the new hot spots that maybe aren't currently on anyone else's radar.
Right now, I would really look at, I think it's the West Side next.
Yeah,
and you're already seeing it.
East Side's kind of already overpopulated, man. It's there's no room up there.
Well, not that, but when one neighborhood changes, those, what made Sugar House great, you're seeing happening in the Granary and Central 9th now, because the demand didn't go away. So they found a new place to kind of create that community. As that builds out, it's going to go somewhere else. And you're already seeing that. I really think the area around the Fair Park, just because it's got the tracks access, another brewery's coming in there, and it's close to downtown. So you have apartments that just opened up. The Bodie was like South Temple, like 700 West. And you're seeing such a cluster there too. It's it's a periphery. You know, the growth is gonna expand until the demand goes away.
Well, and that's even what he wants to, the next question is where does he see the housing market heading? Will the bubble burst or will it not stop getting more and more expensive? I guess we kind of already touched on this.
It's a mix of both. So, I mean, I think because we're not in a housing bubble right now in the sense where the housing bubble that created the recession was people buying homes they couldn't afford. And a lot of people buying multiple properties. Right now it's housing so much because, the supply is so low. You know, I was just looking at a chart and it was looking at like what the average income is to buy a house in each state. And Utah was like in the top like 10.
As affordable?
As not affordable.
Oh, as not
as
affordable.
Expensive.
Really?
Yeah. That's the point we're at. You know, was it last year, 2 years ago? Well, no, even last year, even this year too, like Utah consistently comes up as it's not only the Utah, but Salt Lake, the Wasatch Front, as one of the most expensive markets for first-time home buyers. You know, the median home price has surpassed $300,000 in Salt Lake City. So it's
getting scary, man. Cause like to just buy a home
and
first time, like you said.
And it's once again too, it's a supply issue.
Yeah.
And we have a really great economy. And, you know, a decade ago, businesses were afraid Utah had a weird factor that businesses thought would be an issue for their employees. But after Goldman Sachs showed that like you can expand your business in Salt Lake and be a draw for your talent pool, other companies started following suit. And as Silicon Slopes grows, like it's a mix of like we're welcoming more people to the state than we're used to. And we got to get used to the fact that it's not just our natural increase and our high birth rates that are going to be fueling this population growth. And we got to be building to make sure there's room for everybody.
Well, and then transportation on top of that. What are we going to do with that? I mean, we've got to have something more than just I-15.
And you see a push in that where it's not expanding freeways, but just expanding the mass transit. And that's probably one area where everyone seems to agree on. Cause even just this past legislative session, they made a change. They made adjustments to that gas tax increase that where, you know, originally was Prop 1 where people could vote. You had to vote it in. Well, now, you know, if by 2020 the citizens haven't voted it in, then, counties and cities can manage, they can apply it outright.
Yeah.
And that's kind of showing that like, regardless of how you feel about mass transit, that's the only way we can really, I mean, that's best practices shows that's the only way you can really accommodate growth. Because when you expand freeways and build more freeways, that doesn't actually alleviate traffic because it encourages more sprawl, which then encourages more traffic.
Exactly.
It's focusing development in urban centers and then outside of just downtown too. Because if you have everyone just coming downtown, you're just creating another dedicated traffic stream. But it's having these urban centers and making sure people can get there in a convenient way that doesn't require a car.
Yeah, and the more that we keep growing too, you keep building bigger freeways. We have a huge air problem here. It's an epidemic now.
Oh, definitely. And you know, and I'll sit in community council meetings, and I can't turn to the residents always and say this outright, but I want to gently remind people that like, if you truly are a fan of sustainability, you have to be okay with density. You can't tout your environmental friendliness and push back on it. Doesn't mean it has to be doesn't mean you can't still like regulate and make sure it's appropriate. But we're going to have to be building up.
And I think people in Utah are afraid of that for some reason.
Oh, there's a real fear. And,
why is that?
So I've been in some places. So it depends where you're at. So on the east side, I mean, to be blunt,
isn't it?
It's another density is so. Growing up, did you grow up if you grew up in Utah?
More or less. I mean, I grew up in California, moved here when I was 16. So I mean,
it's a part of it's not Mormon doctrine, but Utah Mormon culture has long pushed the idea that moral living, you're one of the ways to show your morality and your righteousness. And in some ways, almost how God favors you is the bigger your house, the bigger your yard, shows like how well you're living your life.
Really?
And there is a connection to growing up here. If you grow up here, you see it, that good people don't live in apartments.
That's a religious thing. Huh?
I mean, it's a cultural thing. It's a culture connected to a religion, but it's very much a cultural thing.
I didn't know that one.
I mean, I even saw it growing up. The ward I grew up in, we had a lot of apartments in our ward, and we were going to restructure the wards. And the communities that lived up higher up on the hill, there was actually like protest to restructure, to have apartments in their ward, because in their mind, good people don't live in apartments. and you see that all the time. There's a real misconception of, one, who lives in apartments, and two, it also goes back to affordability. Who lives in affordable housing? When they were looking at the 21st South and 21st East, there was a small area plan, and those residents, I was ready for them to ask the developer to like write his name in blood, that they would swear that there would be no affordable housing, because he told them there wouldn't be, and that wasn't enough for them. They kept asking about it. Like there was such a fear that, like, how dare you? And it makes you think, like, where do you think your kids are going to live if you want them to live near you? They're going to need affordable housing. All affordable housing means is if you earn less than the median income, which is the area median income, which, AMI, you qualify for affordable housing. There's different levels, there's different rates. So 80% AMI, that would be a school teacher. They would qualify for affordable housing. That's someone who's fully employed, a productive member of society, in these people's eyes, that would qualify for affordable housing.
What kind of people are they afraid are going to, like, homeless people?
It's an otherness. It's an otherness. Unfortunately, too, and this is kind of where my inner city school teacher background comes in, is I can usually smell when it's also a fear of people of color. There was a pushback with the streetcar because it went east to west. It went west to east, east to west.
That was, I heard, like, to go down to Provo, they were afraid to bring crime down there or something like that. The front runner. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Oh, definitely too.
Well, okay, you're talking about the actual Sugar House streetcar.
I'm talking about the Sugar House streetcar.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
There was a real pushback from residents.
Because it would bring crime.
The idea would have been, well, there were people on record that literally said that, like, but we don't want people from Glendale taking the streetcar over to come gawk at our houses. Like, someone's going to take the time to jump on a streetcar to Glendale, especially with, like, how certain people love to call the police. Are really going to want to go out and just gawk at your house in your neighborhood.
Wow.
And be,
let's go gawk at their houses after this.
You could probably, if you look back, you could probably find that in someone's, like, records.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it.
Just
people say some weird stuff here, man.
And a part of it too, I've also seen, is for some older people, Salt Lake was their safe space.
Yeah,
it was the only place they could live in, where they could stay in Utah and feel accepted in themselves. And so it's, for them, some of them, it's not even like a fear of the other. It's I'm scared that what's always been a safe space to me is changing. But I think in a lot of ways too, some of these neighborhood meetings don't have the same tone in 2018 that they did in 2015, because the change has already started.
Yeah.
We're well into it now. I still think it's kind of the beginning, but we're well into the beginning. Doesn't matter. Wherever you live in Salt Lake, chances are you're probably within a quarter mile of a new apartment building. So you're already starting to see it. And, if the sky didn't fall, you're going to be less scared the next time. And the flip side too is, one of the reasons I do Building Salt Lake is also the more educated you are and the more informed, the less likely you are to react in a fearful way.
Sure.
And
there's another question here before I forget to ask this from Isaac. He wants to know, what does Salt Lake City lack currently that could really put it even more on the map?
When I first started Building Salt Lake was getting a lot of attention for being innovative. And in fact, in fall of 2014, Salt Lake was ranked 6th for cities that, it was city managers and mayors were asked, what cities do you look for inspiration? Salt Lake was ranked 6th. We're no longer on someone's top list anymore. We've stopped being innovative. And there could be finger pointing, there could be decisions. But I think there's some people trying. I just wrote up this last week, bike lanes. We had a really low ranking one of the first ever of its kind bike reports. But you look at our network, and we had a high score for the network. But where we got ranked, we were taken through the coals on our rankings, where we've stopped producing new lanes. We've stopped that growth, because, in a city like this where we have inversions, bike infrastructure, the people that want to live downtown want to bike to work.
Sure.
And we have to, I think for a long time, it's been a misunderstanding of what it means to be an urban environment. And I think for Salt Lake, well, for Utah in general, we weren't used to, like, the idea of people wanting to be downtown, outside of like living around Temple Square, and the fact that like, I think people underestimated that like,
you want to live down
right.
there?
but I think the fact that like that same demand for like urban living that we saw across the country existed here too. People just didn't have a place to go to show that. We didn't have the supply to prove that. Now we're starting to have it, and people are saying that it's real. For the longest time, it used to seem like people would talk about these millennials in this like weird, like alien, like, I don't know if they're real kind of way, but now they're saying like, oh no, they're real because I just built this building and it leased out, and now, and they want these amenities. And so that's why, if you've noticed the past few years, the design is getting better. We're seeing less beige stucco. We're seeing competition does some interesting things, and the more developers have to fight for that renter, and it's really just embracing just those smart growth principles. And
so what do you think we need to bring here to put Salt Lake City more on the map? Like, I don't know if he means a business or.
I think my reading of that was just Salt Lake City as itself as kind of like as a destination city.
Okay.
We need to get back to doing some of the things were getting us national attention a few years ago. Just being innovative and best practices. We had that protected intersection. People may hate it, but we were the second city in the country to have a protected bike intersection, and we got attention for that.
Yeah,
we were seen as a city looking at doing things differently. We have to kind of go back to that. I think we're doing that a little bit with affordable housing. Some of the things we're trying to figure out, we don't necessarily have other cities to point to. ADUs are a little different. We have other cities that we can look at. Those are accessory dwelling units. There are cities we can look at to see how that worked. But with kind of the affordable housing issue, everyone's dealing with that right now. So that is one area that may prove us being innovative. But I just think we got to get back to, we have a real opportunity to be an environmental powerhouse because we have unique geographic conditions that create real quality of life issues.
Yeah.
If you tell me that you don't think about moving during an inversion, you're lying to me and yourself.
I think about it.
We all question why
I'm like,
every
what am I
inversion. We
doing here?
question why we're here. Why am I living here? This is so gross. But then, days like today, we're like, I love living here. It's so beautiful. But we have real, it kind of, and I think it's those inversions is the reason why we have conversations about air quality that other red states don't have.
Sure.
And conversations about mass transit that other red states aren't having. But I think as a city like Salt Lake, that's kind of like the progressive heart, is we need to go back to kind of leading the way. And right now it seems like some of our political leaders respond to only who yells the loudest. And we have to get past that. Because,
do you think that might even be a generational thing though too with the
definitely
political things, once we get younger generations
and they're coming in droves. And I definitely think that during the mayor election 2015, some of that energy seemed against the previous mayor seemed to be a fear of the growth that was happening. It was a fear of like, you as our leader are somehow made all this change happen, and it scares me. So you need to go. And some of those people still have an ear, but I think it's a smaller group because we're adding a lot of residents. Just since I've been covering Building Salt Lake, we've probably added 4,000 residential units, and we're going to add even more. We have about 3,500 under construction right now, and another 4,000 in development. We'll find out by the end of this month kind of what our current estimates are, but we're adding people, and a lot of people, and we're not adding them just in one place in the city. You see the cranes all over the city, and I think it's just we can't forget infrastructure, and we got to look at like innovative ways of connectivity, and we have to get people out of their cars. If we get people out of their cars, we're going to be seen as an even greater urban destination.
But we're not a walkable city like a lot. You think we can be?
We can be. I agree we're not, but we can be. We have walkable pockets.
How would we become more walkable here?
It's breaking up the blocks. And that's one thing that with Building Salt Lake, I have to be cognizant of. I'm a journalist and I can only editorialize so much. So I make sure when I'm editorializing, it's an editorial. But any reporting I do is under the guise of, under the scope of Building Salt Lake as an entity advocates for smart growth. So, and just those are best practices. It's that, and we have streets that are so wide. There should be a bike lane on every, especially the downtown blocks. And
some of them are ridiculous.
So the wide streets go until about 900 south, where there should be a bike lane on every single one of those. We've even had experts to come in. There was a group, the Rose Foundation, I forget the full name, but Salt Lake's a partner of this, where it's leaders from different cities go to travel to each other's cities and share best practices and best ideas. And one of the speakers was like, your streets are huge. So you can build up to the sidewalk and you can do things with your street and still meet fire code because you have a huge street. And there's no reason why we shouldn't. There should be a bike lane on every wide street in the city.
And there isn't.
There isn't. In fact, it's been from my knowledge, we have any new bike lane we've added was the process had already started. Planning for that bike lane already started in the previous administration. So right now we're just not seeing an appetite from our current administration for bike lanes. And that's unfortunate because we need them.
The former, he was a bigger biker.
He was.
Yeah, he was a bike advocate.
And there's some bike lanes. In fact, I know people in a lot of the cyclist community have been really angered because some have been stopped completely. So 2100 South was just some residents got really loud and they pulled the plug on that one before the process was even finished.
Why though?
Because people yelled the loudest.
It's very incomplete. Because I for the last couple of years I was riding back and forth all the way to 33rd South, and all of a sudden you get to these areas that are just so dangerous. There's a lot of areas where I'm just like, okay, I'll try to figure out a way to take Jordan River Parkway for a while, then come up because it's so the road shoulders are, just gravelly and everything. They're not maintained. And
I come across a lot of people who they want to bike to work. They want that option and they want lanes that make them feel safe. They want ways to get to work that make them feel safe because one, most of the year we have actually pretty great weather and it's great to be outside. And two, I think we're all aware of how a lot of us are more aware of how what we do contributes to our air. And I think we should be encouraging people to be more proactive in that way and give them more opportunities. A few residents who yell about a bike lane shouldn't dictate, especially in a community like ours where we have my younger brother died of cystic fibrosis. So for me, the inversions are very personal because I remember one year he even had to sleep his first night in the hospital. He had to go to the hospital every inversion. And there was one year I remember, it was maybe 2005, his first night he had to sleep in the hallway at the University Hospital because they were so overbooked from an inversion. It was a really bad inversion that year. It was by about 2 weeks into that inversion, the University Hospital was above capacity. That's real. I don't even want to have conversations about we sometimes we have leaders that are more concerned about what I drink than the air I breathe. That we gotta have, I think I'm at the stage where I think I can be direct and this is what we need. We need more bike lanes in the city.
It will help with air quality. It won't completely eliminate the inversion.
But it makes a difference. And the more people get off cars and we need more mass transit. And that's one area right now we're seeing city council is really pushing for more mass transit.
Affordable mass transit though. I had a buddy that it was cheaper for him to drive from Draper to Ogden in his own vehicle than to take Front Runner.
And that's one thing that's at Salt Lake. Salt Lake does have the Hive Pass, which if you are a regular transit rider.
But that's if you live downtown versus we want the people that live like Draper, Sandy. They're driving up to Ogden too for work, so they're polluting our air. So why not give them an inexpensive pass too instead of $250, $300 for? And that
definitely goes in the city because that's something that Salt Lake has a Hive Pass because they reached out to UTA. And so part of that too is network. Truthfully too, the way gas prices are going in the next year, it's probably going to be more affordable to ride transit again. If you guys remember 2008, gas was so high. Mass transit numbers jumped because it was so much cheaper.
Well, and I think the Hive Pass is great, but everybody who lives downtown that can get it are probably going to work down here anyway. Well, so they're not going to take it.
And you're right, it's Salt Lake specific. And the one issue with it's not an issue with the Hive Pass, but it does impact its ability to be fully effective. Is our transit network? We have the only mass transit network in the country that serves technically 3 different metropolitan areas.
Oh yeah, it's great. We have great transportation. Don't get me wrong,
but it's a regional system. We so our local transit It's more about getting you to other parts of the region than getting you across the city. Yeah. And that is an area where the city itself is really looking to fix.
Yeah.
Because if you want to increase ridership, especially in the more dense corridors, you got to make those quick trips more feasible too.
Yeah, you don't want to wait, an hour just at a bus stop
exactly.
to get you 9 blocks,
Yeah.
It's like
and transit is something we will see stuff happen.
Changing.
Just right away because council already approved that sales tax that was kind of that deal with the legislature for the Northwest Quadrant was a whole other issue. But, and they're already looking at which transit routes should be the first to, well, because the city recently adopted the transit master plan. So really it's looking at which parts of the plan should be implemented first now that there are some funding options. But so that's happening. So for me, the next push is as the city, we're looking at, we've got to redo a lot of our roads. That's where I think as residents, we have to demand that if we're going to fix our roads, now's the time to let's make sure bike lanes are in there. Cause the city actually has a bicycle pedestrian master plan that makes it a mandate. Like when you redo roads, you need to heavily consider a bike lane as part of making streets more complete. It's a master plan. So master plans sometimes come down to the mayor who has the final say. So kind of as residents, this is our real opportunity to if we keep the pressure on, we could have that money has to go towards our streets have to be repaved anyway. So this is the best time probably because unfortunately we have so many streets in dire need of repairs. This is probably a historic opportunity to really just change the connectivity and kind of landscape of change the streetscape in our city.
How can listeners that are listening right now get more involved in the city? Things that you're doing. How can even myself, how can we stay informed? Obviously go to your website, buildingsaltlake.com, but other ways to stay informed.
Yeah, Building Salt Lake is a great way to stay informed, but all that does is keep you informed. So if you want to, do something with that new information, community councils, no matter where you live in the city, with the exception of a few East Side neighborhoods, you probably live in a community council that meets monthly. If you want to find out, if you wonder what community council you're a part of, you can do a quick Google search. If you just type in Salt Lake Community Council's map, the city has a map. You can find out which community council you're in. That's a great way because not only that, but that's how you can even give feedback to developers. A lot of these projects that are coming up, some of them were the final product is a lot better than what was originally proposed because of residents giving constructive criticism in community council meetings and developers.
Are you pretty active? Do you go to a lot of those?
Not as many as I can because I teach in the evenings, part-time.
Where do you teach?
So, I teach at a treatment center part-time.
Okay.
It's,
that's cool.
That's my hobby. Teaching's my hobby. Journalism is a full-time job. Teaching is the hobby now. I mean, that's just one of the best ways. And we're seeing it really with a lot of the growth happening. We're seeing some really engaged community councils and developers. If they have to go before the planning commission, they have to go through that community council and you can meet and talk to these people that are building in your neighborhoods that will impact how your neighborhood looks and feels. People love to complain when it's too late. Well, you can get in there early and be heard.
What about favorite local eating spots, Isaac? I ask this every episode. I got to know where you like to go to eat as we kind of wrap up this.
Of course. I love Sweet Lake Biscuits.
I haven't been there yet.
I love it. And it's one of the few places that even my pickiest and bougiest friends enjoy. Coffee wise, I'm a sucker for Blue Copper.
It's pretty good coffee there.
I love Blue Copper coffee. Yeah. Oh, I'm obsessed with Taco Taco. It doesn't get much better to me than Taco Taco. And they're one of the few places that has Negro Modelo.
Even better than Red Iguana and all that.
Oh, have you been to Taco Taco?
I haven't, no. I got to go check. I know where it is.
It's amazing. And, and one of the few Mexican places I've found here actually has Negro Modelo, which is it's the Modelo brand, but it's the darker lager.
Right, yeah.
And it's still Mexican. So try it with a lime. It sounds like it'd be wrong, but trust me. Just like that. I heard I don't know if you guys have heard this. Apparently it's now a thing. It's a Babayado or Baba something. It's Baba. You went to his Baba beer with a shot of espresso.
Okay.
Yeah. In any place that serves that.
The dark beer.
Ooh.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Taco Taco, Sweet Lake are probably my two favorites right now. But luckily we have a scene that's always changing. So
yeah. A lot of good food here.
Oh yeah.
A lot of really good food.
A lot of new places.
For a city our size, we're spoiled. And anytime New York Times or someone comes in and covers our city, they're always you're not supposed to have a dining scene like this. You're not big enough a city yet, but we have it. So we should be grateful for it.
Have you been to Pretty Bird?
I was about to say that. I finally had my Pretty Bird. It was awesome. I'm a chicken guy in general. Like I go to a steakhouse and get the chicken. And so I love chicken. I'm not anti-steak. I just love chicken. And so chicken done well makes me happy.
If you could bring a business that used to be in Salt Lake back to life, what would it be? Is there any that you?
What could I relocate a long-standing like Bountiful establishment?
Sure, man. Whatever.
So I'm a Bountiful kid, and so I have a love for Top Hat video.
Okay.
I think Top Hat should be in Salt. I don't think Bountiful deserves Top Hat.
Is it still in Bountiful?
It is still there, and it's just
a video store.
And if you go and you'll see, you'll get it. You'll get why.
Do you rent video still? VHS?
No, I don't go to Top Hat anymore. I would if it was in Salt Lake. But it was an experience. Like they only hire people who know movies.
Yeah.
And so you could just go and just get recommendations from people who get film, and that almost doesn't exist anymore. And
no. You go to a red box.
And I grew up in Bountiful, so I can speak of my neighborhood like this. Like that should be in Salt Lake.
Yeah.
I think Salt Lake would be a better home. I mean, no offense to my Bountifleites. I'm glad they're still keeping it alive, but I just, maybe for even selfish reasons, just to have it closer, just because I don't like going to Bountiful. But I would love to have that in Salt Lake, because what a rare and it's still around. It's in Colonial Square.
Dude, that used to be a thing. Like Friday night, you go to the movie store, go to your Blockbuster, your video store, and then you would spend hours picking a few movies for the weekend, man.
Well, Top Hat is such an institution that when I was in high school, I mean, not only it was also where you ran into people, because the lines would be so long, because they forever have done. I mean, I don't know if it's the same price because of inflation, but I mean, it was like $1 for like a DVD after like 10 p.m. And so you'd have this crazy long line of people at 10 p.m. for the last hour. And maybe that's one of the reasons why they are still around. And as someone who loves film, like it was just a great place to go and talk to people that know film.
Sure.
Their clerks just aren't there to ring you up. They are passionate about film.
I've had a heck of a chat here with you, Isaac. Seriously, I've learned a lot. I don't know about you, Mark, but I've learned a lot about the city.
Yeah.
It definitely made me want to get more involved with what's going on around Salt Lake City. How can people get a hold of you? Let's run down the websites. Because I know there's even like people can donate to your website to get more involved.
Yeah, be members, please. Because good journalism isn't free. And buildingsaltlake.com. I'm super easy to get a hold of. Isaac at buildingsaltlake.com. It's ISAAC because that's a name no one can ever spell right for some reason. But it's just Isaac at buildingsaltlake.com. Don't hesitate to ask questions. I'll get that sometimes. People will like, hey, what's that? And even tips. If sometimes I'm one man. I can only get to so much, and so sometimes like a project will start before it's on my radar. So if you see something too, like, hey, you should cover this. Let me know. If I'm not covering it, it's not because it's not always intentional. So
definitely a cool website. Anything else you want to ask him, Mark, before we let him go?
Oh man, now that I've actually listened to what you do, I have probably 20,000 questions. I mean,
I definitely want to bring him back through the podcast. I should make you a regular somehow. Like we stay up to date on what's going around Salt Lake.
It's like little
updates.
Yeah.
Monthly updates, special episodes. I don't know, something. I don't know. It could be a lot of fun, I think. I don't know. But cool, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, this is, I do what I do because I like talking about Salt Lake.
Yeah.
So I could.
Well, that's why I do this podcast.
Keep the conversation going, right?
Seems like a good place to end the show, though. Thank you so much,
awesome.
Isaac.
Thank you.
And I'm serious. We'll catch up with you very
pleasure.
soon.
Thank you.
You bet. All right. Many thanks again to Isaac Riddle for coming on this episode of the podcast. Head on over to our website, though, right now, iamsaltlake.com/333. That's where all like the links and all of that to get in touch with Isaac, to go to his blog, to send him a message, to say, hey, you know what? You were awesome on I Am Salt Lake podcast. And I was actually tossing this idea around, Chrissy, and you have no idea I'm even going to say this right now.
Uh-oh.
But when Isaac was on the podcast, I'm like, this would be really fun to bring him through like maybe once a month, once every couple of months, and basically have like a question and answer session where listeners of I Am Salt Lake can submit questions and say, hey, what's going on with this? And then maybe Isaac can answer it. And
I actually love that because there's so much going on in downtown Salt Lake right now. It would be really fun to have an expert.
Yeah, and just like kind of a bonus episode. It could be a lot of fun. Let us know. Shoot us a message. Connect with us somehow. Say, hey, that's a good idea or that's a bad idea.
Tell us you want more or less. Hey, don't forget to come visit us at the Downtown Farmers Market. Chris and I are going to have a booth there. We're going to be selling merch. We're going to be giving out hugs and high fives. Those are free, by the way. And we're going to be there Saturday, June 16th and Saturday, June 30th. Make sure you're following us on social media and you can stay up to date with more of that.
You actually said we're going to have a booth. There's actually an I Am Salt Lake
booth.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
I know.
So
it's an I Am Salt Lake booth.
Well, what kind of merch are you going to have? Maybe we'll have some of the flasks. And there are T-shirts in the works here, guys. So be patient. I know you've been waiting for almost 6 years for this podcast to really have any T-shirts. It is happening.
Look, they're worth the wait.
They really will be. Anyway, go head on over. Downtown Farmers Market is right there at Pioneer Park, right on like the corner of 300 West, 300 South, right there in that block area. A lot of fun. We'll be down there the 16th and 30th of June. And before we do leave this episode, there are a few ways you can connect with us. Please connect. I mean, let's make this podcast more than just a podcast. Let's continue the community. Let's continue the conversation. We have an awesome Facebook group I think there's close to 700 people in there at this point. Last time I checked. If you go to iamsaltlake.com/group, this will take you to the Facebook group. You do have to send a request. We have a little lockdown, closed, private group. That way we could talk about...
No jerks.
Yeah, no jerks. It keeps all the jerks out. Join up with there. Our website, iamsaltlake.com, really, really easy to remember. We're on all the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, I Am Salt Lake. I know people can find you, Chrissy, at Lady Salt Lake, right?
Lady
on
Salt
Instagram
Lake across
and
the
Twitter.
board. Yep.
And then hello@iamsaltlake.com is our email address. That just goes right to both of us. So yeah, connect with us.
For sure. And many thanks again to our sponsors for this episode, Five Wives Vodka. You can pick it up at your local liquor store or ask for it at any of the local bars. And Market Source Real Estate. Head on over to their website at thinksaltlakecity.com.
And many thanks again to Access Salt Lake, great co-working space right here in the heart of downtown Salt Lake City. Stop by, check it out. Might serve some of your needs. You all have a great week. Get out and enjoy the city. And always remember to support local.
And good night, Grammy.
You know what I forgot to do, actually, when we were reading the sponsor reads in the middle of this episode, talking about our awesome sponsor, Five Wives Vodka, I forgot to mention that they're having a serious sale here in June at the Utah DABC. The Five Wives Vodka, the 1.75 liter, that's like the big bottle of it, $8 off. It's like, get out of town, $8 off. I mean, this is like stock up your pantry. Great stocking stuffers, never too early. No, well, let's not talk about Christmas. Five Wives Heavenly Vodka. This is the Heavenly Vanilla flavored vodka, $3 off. And then there's the Madame Patarini Gin is on sale. The Porter's Fire, Porter's Peach, Porter's Apple. Head on over to the Utah DABC. Check it out. I mean, these are all on sale. You got to support these guys. Five Wives Vodka is awesome. Anyway, you guys have a good day.